For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith here with Chris Trevino, providing you instant analysis after USC's 14th and final fall camp practice. Now, Chris, it was a full pads practice. What did you learn today in the early practice window?
Jack, I just want to say congrats on your rookie debut right now. Just show him a lot of love on YouTube, pick up his rookie card. Talented rookie here. But yes, it was a full pads practice, the final practice of fall camp. Fall camp is over, so USC is going to be transitioning into, it's almost game week, Jack. But the energy was very high today. You could tell it was that kind of release of being the end of fall camp. Guys were coming out with smiles. Some guys were rapping the songs. Good energy out there, and some didn't seem like any different practice though when you look at it. Same kind of thing they did in the warm-ups. Only thing that was majorly different was there wasn't a lot of kick returning. Usually when we go into practice, they have the skill guys kind of doing kick returns. Nope, none of that. Everyone was doing team warm-ups. They did have a little bit of a scrimmage portion today for the final day, but Lincoln and them, they ended on a high note with a physical full pads practice.
I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about that scrimmage in the coming days, ask coaches about how that went. We know the last scrimmage, the offense got the upper hand on the defense a little bit, but now we got to talk to Coach Riley. What were some of your thoughts about the things that he told us after practice?
Yeah, only Coach Riley spoke today, but the first question that was thrown at him, who do you feel like improved the most, through this fall camp? And, he was he thought about it for a second. Some names he put out there, Rasir Wright, the talented sophomore cornerback who's been working with those ones for most of the fall camp, where he kind of ended in spring. Mason Murphy was another guy that he highlighted. Safety Examarion Gordon was another one. But he said there's a lot of guys you could name. He said more guys have taken leaps, more guys have improved greatly through fall camp than those that haven't. So he was very happy that he felt like across the board, everyone on this team was making improvements. Everyone was getting better each and every day. That's something he's really stressed since he took over. He knew he had a lot of work to do with this roster. They went out, built a new roster, got these guys in here, but then they just needed to improve. They needed to get better because anybody that watched the USC team last year knew that there was lots of improvement to be made on both sides of the ball with this new offense, with this new defense. So I think that was kind of what he was hitting on in terms of an overarching theme for fall camp, was that he felt like everyone across the board was getting better.
I think that USC fans will be excited about the consistent improvement. One key to that is continuing to be competitive. And even though we finished up fall camp, Coach Riley stressed that they're going to continue to be competitive all throughout the rest of the week. So what did you think about that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, since day one, he's coming here, like I mentioned, he's been preaching competition. Anyone could take anyone's job, and that's going to continue throughout fall camp, throughout the season. Anyone could be the guy on this team. And he said, that's something they really wanted to hit on moving forward. Just because fall camp is over, when you see the majority of your starters and your backups and your two deep kind of take form, that's not going to end once they get into game week. Once they're in the season, that's still going to hit, and that's exactly what they need to do. He was asked, where's his biggest concern right now in terms of his team, and he said, I understand what you're asking with that question, but he doesn't look at it that way. He looks at it like, oh, this is our best position group right now. Well, they still need to get better. This is our weakest position group. These guys still need to get better. Everyone needs to get better, from the coaches, from the support staff. Everybody needs to be doing what they need to do to take their game to the next level. Not just players, but coaches and staff members, all that. So that's something that they're really going to hit on as they transition into game week, into game time.
Another question that was asked is what positions still need to be figured out. Coach Riley mentioned cornerbacks. There's another safety spot up for grabs, left tackle, and then just trying to figure out the rotation between skill positions, interior defensive line. What did you think about some of the battles that he mentioned?
Yeah, Coach Riley was pretty forthcoming with sort of laying out these thoughts that he has. He gave a lot there, but he said, there's positions where they feel like they're going to have a rotation. Obviously, wide receiver with all that talent they have, running back. We're not surprised by that. But another one he said is interior defensive line. It sounds like there's about 5 or 6 guys, he said, that are going to play. Safety is another position, and cornerback is where they feel they're going to rotate some guys. So that's going to be interesting to see in terms of how that looks, especially on the defensive side. Brian Odom, linebackers coach, said yesterday he's not going to be rotating. His starters are going to be starters. So it's interesting that a lot of different positions on the defensive side of the ball will have some rotation. Most interesting, those cornerback spots, which seem to be, Mekhi Blackman, Sierra Wright, Jacoby Covington, the Washington transfer, and Josh Jackson and Prophet Brown are some of those guys who've been working along that two deep right now. So it's going to be interesting to watch that. And the offensive line was something that was one of the big notes we took away from his talk in terms of saying that left tackle position still up in the air. It's sort of an interesting position. That's what he said in terms of Cortland Ford, Bobby Haskins, and we kind of talked about how this was one of the most important position battles for this team. The left tackle, who's going to protect Caleb Williams and that blind side. And it sounds like if they keep pushing each other, maybe one of them is going to have to shift around somewhere on the offensive line. But he did mention, through the rest of that line, Andrew Voorhees, Brett Nealon, Justin Detus, and Jonah Monheim, they seem pretty set there. I was a little surprised he went out there and said Jonah Monheim because we figured maybe that right tackle position would be up for grabs. But very complimentary of Jonah, says he's doing all the work that he picked up with in spring, into summer, and into fall. So it sounds like Jonah is on track to hold on to that right tackle job, but we still need to see what happens with that left tackle job with Cortland Ford and Bobby Haskins. They're still battling it out. So that's going to be interesting to watch throughout the next couple weeks as we go into that Rice game. But don't count out the possibility of one of those guys ending up on the right side.
Now, Chris, one of the most interesting things that I heard from Lincoln Riley was he's got to find that balance between naming some starters at certain positions that we just mentioned and also keeping that competitive aspect throughout the rest of the practices up until the Rice game as we transition into a new period out of fall camp into a little bit of game prep. What did you think of that transition and finding that balance?
Right. It's two sides of the coin. While you do want to keep that competition up, you still need to pick your starters. And that's something that he mentioned that this week or this coming week, they're going to sit down, look at it by position and kind of lay out kind of that depth chart. So I think in the next week or so, we're going to start to see kind of where those spots are, where those fluid spots still are. But it sounds like most of this team is pretty set when you look at it. There is some of that rotation to figure out, but it sounds like they're going to kind of nail that down, maybe come out with their starting quarterback, wink, wink, Caleb Williams, sometime in the next week. We all know where that is, but you still got to build this roster from top to bottom. That's something that he mentioned in terms of, they don't just care. You can't just care about your starters or your two deep. You need the full roster. And those guys down there on the scout team, those guys are super important. And he mentioned, a big name, Hollywood Brown, was the guy, when he broke out, he was on the scout team. And then within middle of the season, he kind of broke out and became a national name, a national player, and, gone on to the NFL and all those things. So they need players like that to develop. Your scout team is vitally important to the progress of your team. USC, we mentioned this multiple times, last year did not have a really good scout team. They had depth issues. They had linebackers playing defensive linemen. They had former wide receivers playing quarterback. They just did not have enough depth to fully build out a scout team, which is so vital in practice. You need those guys to give you those looks going into game week. So he seemed very excited about what they have on scout and the talent they're going to have on scout. So I think that's a big storyline moving forward.
I know that the players must have been loving fall camp as much as I've loved summer break, but they do start classes this week, and they've got to get into all the academics and the extracurriculars, all that kind of stuff that comes alongside football as well, that Coach Riley and this coaching staff have to figure out how to make that schedule. What was your opinion on what he said about that?
Yeah, I mean, this fall camp for the media and them, it's been kind of keeping them on their toes. You have early morning practices, you got night practice the next time you're in the Coliseum, you're on Howard Jones. This practice was slated for 9 a.m., but they went in at 8 a.m., so you're keeping these kids on their toes. But now, once you're getting into the rigors of school and a season, you want that schedule for them. You want them to fall into that rhythm. You might want to change it up a little bit, but you want them to have their class schedules. You want them to know that practice is this time, Wednesdays is this time. You have meetings here, you have training here, you have nutrition, you have all those other things. You have study hall, all those things he mentioned. So they want to get these kids into their schedule for the season and learn how to practice for in-season, because it's a lot different from what you see on fall camp. So that's going to be the transition this week, is sort of getting them into that rhythm, getting them into that process, and learning how to practice for in the season as we get into this 2022 campaign.
After following you and Ryan for the last couple of days, I know better than to forget about injury. So what do you want to talk about for Rehab Island? Who's injured, who's not?
Quick study. This guy knows. Yes, the big news, obviously, was that Corey Foreman was out there in pads, and, he was asked about him. He says he needs reps, and they need to get him caught up quickly, because obviously he's a big-time player, and he can make big-time plays. So that rush end position is pretty thin in fall camp, but sounds like they're going to try to get him sped up and ramp him up as quickly as possible. He has some time, they mentioned, but he needs to be out there. He needs to stay out there, and he needs to get some reps. So these next 2 weeks are going to be critical for him and this defense in terms of kind of building that depth up, because Romello Height, he's a guy who's been battling a nagging injury throughout fall camp. He was wearing the practice shirt, the yellow non-contact today. He did not practice the last time we were out here, but he was in full pads today, so that was a good sign, but he's still not 100% healthy. So they really could use Corey Foreman to be a guy there to help alleviate some of those depth issues. But other guys that remained out were, some of the usual suspects. Michael Jackson, he was out. Josh Follow came out in pads, but then I saw him at the end of practice. He was out of pads, so not a great sign there. But Damani Jackson, the freshman cornerback, he was out once again. Chris Thompson Jr., linebacker, he was out. Kyle Ford was out. Solomon Tuliapupu was out as well. Two new names on Rehab Island were safety Britton Allen, who suffered that knee injury last season. He posted a couple days ago about the knee bothering him, so I'm not surprised that he's out. But the big one also today was Xavier Alford, who's working with the number one defense. So that was a blow. He missed most of spring, so didn't really love to see him out. Love to see him out for the final day of fall camp, but want to get him healthy. He's going to be a big part of the rotation. Maybe you're even your starter. And Bryson Shaw is someone, the Ohio State transfer, is someone we've seen come out in pads a lot, but he's been limited. Today he was not in pads. Lincoln Riley mentioned him by name. He's been dinged up, and they expect to get him back on Monday. So that's a good sign, getting him back. He has so much experience, and I think he's going to be a critical part of the safety rotation. But once they get him back, the safety depth will be a little bit better. And he said overall they expect some guys to be back on Monday. So overall, an interesting Rehab Island today.
And wrapping it up, this is the last day of fall camp. So, Chris, I want to get your thoughts about how you thought fall camp went in general. Just some wrapping up thoughts for you.
First off, I think the big thing is that they got out of it relatively healthy. You look around college football and fall camp, there's always these massive injuries. Now, they did lose Jude Wolfe to that broken foot, and he's going to have surgery, but he's going to be back at some point. He's going to be back at midseason at the earliest. And I think overall, you knock on wood, I think they had a really good camp in terms of, productivity, getting some of those guys some confidence, Sierra Wright, Jonah Monheim, get that left tackle battle going. And I think they got to showcase some of that depth, because in spring, it was bad. It was bad. And in terms of that defensive side, and Lincoln mentioned this several times throughout fall camp, is that this roster, they overhauled it even more. And I think you could tell looking out there, like, this is a much deeper team than we saw several months ago. And I think that's the big thing that jumped out to me, is that this team seems set in a lot of positions, but that depth is so vital for this season. And because it's a long season, 12 games, they got some tough road games, they got to go to Utah, all that stuff. So depth is going to be key. And it's good that they went out and got that and addressed those needs. They still need some answers at some positions. Rush end is a little bit concerning. I think we're going to have to monitor that going into fall camp and going to that Rice game. But if Romello Height, Corey Foreman can be healthy, I think you feel okay with that. And the defensive line is another thing I've been looking at, because I was a little concerned they did not get sort of an impact defensive line, but you look at it, the depth seems really good, and I think they're going to be able to carry through with that. Wide receiver unit, offense, I think they're going to put up a lot of points. Just watching them out there with Jordan Addison and what he brings. Caleb Williams, your number one. They're really set on offense. Just got to figure out that left tackle. But overall, I think it was a really productive spring and a fun way to end spring, because they had the shaved ice truck out here. They had ice cream, popsicles.
I know a lot. They didn't give us any.
No, they didn't give us any. I mean, maybe it was a little bit hotter. It's been an overcast day, so I think it was okay. The players, they went through fall camp. We didn't get through the full fall camp. They had a long fall camp. A well-deserved treat for the end. They have some coaches had their families out here, so it was a really family environment. So I think it was a really nice note, a sweet note, if you will, to end on fall camp.
Well, fall camp is over, but we're not done getting you guys USC football content. Stay tuned the next couple of weeks as we prepare for USC versus Rice later in early September. So I've been Jack Smith. This is Chris Trevino. Instant Analysis. Follow USCfootball.com for more.